always a pleasure to come to these and listen to your eulogy. I won't have to worry about that in the future. We will get it down to 5 lines next time around. It's a pleasure to be here. I had the opportunity to be in Vernon the other night. We were in Bloomfield a little earlier, and these are a lot of fun for someone who's never run for public office before to get a chance to meet people in the state, people who care about the future of it and are committed to making change. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes here. I want to acknowledge a few folks. I want to everybody and many of both Lieutenant Governor Fidelli and Mark have acknowledged a few folks. I just want to make sure that my wife is here, Kirsten, with me tonight. She's the one that's 26, not me. And I'm delighted that Tracy Enders and her husband Michael are here. Tracy's been good enough to sign on the campaign to be our grassroots volunteer coordinator. So Tracy, we greatly appreciate your help. Why do you run for governor? I mean, I'm running for governor for the same reason that both Mark and Mike and everyone else is, and that's the concern about the future of this state, the diminishing opportunities, the loss of confidence the private sector has in the state, the loss of confidence that really the residents have in the state about the future. Loss of confidence in investing capital here, loss of confidence of putting new jobs here or keeping jobs here, loss of confidence in wanting to stay here and pursue a career here, whether you're 20 or 40 or 60. So that's the reason, and my goal here is when I become governor is to restore that confidence. I'll talk about 3 things under 3 headings as to how I would plan to do that. And I've labeled those headings: thinking big, speaking candidly, and acting decisively. Under the heading of thinking big, starting in January of next year, I would see myself as the Chief Economic Development Officer, the Chief Marketing Officer for this state, the Chief Opportunity Officer for the state. And what I mean by that, I'll give you 3 examples. One is that the governor has to be the chief recruiter in this state for the businesses that are here, talking to the businesses that are here, convincing them why they should stay here. Going out in this country at certain trade shows and making sure that companies that want to be in the Northeast have Connecticut on their radar screen. Taking occasional trips, as Mike did on the Amsterdam flight, into Europe, particularly to Germany and the UK, to talk about the opportunities there. There are roughly, I think, 30 companies in Connecticut that are owned by German parents. There's a lot of logical connections there that we need to exploit. As I've said before, if Connecticut doesn't have a hungry governor, there are 49 other states that will come in here and eat our lunch, and in many cases do. Governors come into the state, they talk to our CEOs, they're active recruiters of them. So Connecticut has to be out in the same way, doing that same kind of active, aggressive recruiting, selling our assets, selling the extraordinary quality of life we have here, selling the extraordinary workforce we have, highly educated, one of the most productive in the world. That's a great asset, and we have to learn how to sell it. If we don't sell it, no one's going to sell it for us, particularly in this highly competitive global economy. Second example is I believe one of the things the state should do is make sure that we have a robust transportation system. Not for the transportation system to be a means to an end in itself, but to be a means to that end. We do need to keep our roads and bridges repaired. We do need to have adequate mass transit. We do need to have an airport system that connects us to the world. We need to use the Long Island Sound to move goods out of New Jersey, out of the Port Authority up here on a regular basis. That's going to require money. And one of the 2 things that I've talked about in the past is the need to return about $225 to $260 million that was taken out of the state when we reduced the gasoline tax in 1998. We have to find a way to get that money back. I'm happy to talk about ways to do it, but we also have to the point that Mark made, convince the people of this state that when that money goes back into the Special Transportation Fund, it stays there and is not available to the General Assembly to fund other activities within the state. It's a critical issue. It's one that I think is needed not just for today and tomorrow, but for the long term. Third example I would give you is I think getting transatlantic air service back into Bradley is key. The state has to play a role in ensuring that an airline will come and do that. We were successful twice with Northwest Airlines and Delta. The second flight never got off the ground. I think there's an opportunity to do that. That would be a key area, a key factor in our agenda. And the third thing I'll just talk about in thinking big and creating the jobs and bringing revenue in is using the UConn Medical School as an economic driver. Those of you who follow the Dempsey Hospital medical school situation, I'm not talking about the hospital. I'm talking about the medical school. We need to bring the school back up to first-tier status. We need to make sure it attracts research dollars in here that will drive jobs so that we have a healthcare system that's not only a quality of life asset for all of us, but is a true economic driver. Under the heading of speaking candidly, we do have to be honest with one another of how big this fiscal problem is. We are bordering on fiscal insanity, and that's one of the reasons people don't have confidence in the state, not knowing where the next tax is going to come from or the next unfunded mandate is going to come from. So we have to look hard and be honest about the fact that there's $5 billion of one-time revenue in this current budget. We have to be honest about the $60 to $80 billion of unfunded pension and health care liabilities, and we have to take steps to start addressing that. And I'll just give two examples here, at least the way I thought about this. One, both in the near term and the longer term, we have to change the health care and pension benefits for state workers. They have to be changed. Including one of Joan's sons who works in the state, and I'm a big fan of folks who are there. But the way we cannot sustain the long-term costs associated with that. So moving from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan for state workers has to come quickly, and it has to be there for the long term. Those of you who work in the private sector know that if you have health care, you're paying for a significant chunk of the insurance premium. You probably have a high deductible. You may have an HSA account. And if you have a retirement plan, in all likelihood, it's a 401k model, not something that's a guaranteed situation. That has to change. We do have to do consolidation of government, as both Mark and Mike suggested. I'll give you one that's on top of my mind. Can we look hard at whether we need two university systems? Do we need a University of Connecticut system and a CSU system? I'm not talking necessarily about closing campuses per se. We've got duplicate administrations in there. It's an example of where we've got an opportunity to look hard at something to refine and bring dollars, instead of having a 6% increase at UConn next year for room, board, and tuition, at least to bring put a cap on that total cost for state residents to have a better shot at higher education. Third thing I've talked about is acting decisively. So thinking big, speaking candidly, and acting decisively. And I will take Mark's point on team of rivals. I've spent the 16 years I've been here bringing people together on difficult issues. We brought people together on the Transportation Strategy Board to come out with a multi-year, multimodal strategy with funding identified. That plan went on the shelf. I've worked with people in riverfront recapture. For those of you who are familiar with the riverfront system downtown, bringing Hartford, East Hartford, the MDC, and riverfront recapture together. Not by myself, but being a catalyst to bring people together to resolve how we could have one of the top, to bring the assets together and the maintenance together to make sure we have one of the top river park systems in the country up in the Hartford area. So my time here, both in the bank and at the Alliance, has been bringing people together, and I would plan to do that in this job. I do think you need to bring your rivals together. I'll work as hard as I can for Republicans Tim and others who run for the legislature. The odds are we're still going to be facing a Democratic legislature come January. And I'll be happy to have to work with you to change it. But the reality is we're going to have to work with multiple parties to solve these issues. And I would bring people together starting right after the election to identify 4 or 5 key things around health care and transportation and defined benefit compensation, so that when we took the office, put the first budget in with a piece of legislation, we had a definitive set of actions that we would go after. And I would spend the bulk of my time after that campaigning out in the office, after I'm elected, working with RTCs like this, working with people around the state chambers of commerce, because I really believe the only way we're going to change things in the state is not to have a governor, one person, trying to change this, trying to convince the legislature. The legislature will only be convinced if those of us out here in the hustings go at it day after day after day. So identify 4 or 5 things, come out and sell that to all of you on a regular basis, and urge your participation to make sure we made the change, not over 10 years, but over a 2 to 4 year period. Appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you tonight. Look forward to coming to the town committee in the future, and look forward to chatting with you after this. Remember, think big, speak candidly, act decisively. Thank you very much. Thank you.